Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. Are you ready to unlock the full potential and growth in your business? You've already crossed 7 figures in sales, but the challenge is knowing how to take your business to the next level. Join Josh Hadley, an 8-figure Ecomm business owner and investor, as he interviews highly successful business owners. Get ready, because you're going to learn specific actions you can take today to help your business reach its full potential and leave a lasting impact on the world.
Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hadley, where I interview the top business leaders in e-commerce. Past guests include Kevin King, Stephen Pope, and Howard Tai. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Pradeep Sacitharan, CEO of Donsfield, an international business and trade development firm, and we're going to be talking a lot about his Amazon journey and also acquiring other businesses. This episode is brought to you by the Ecomm Breakthrough Consulting, where I help take 7-figure companies and grow them to 8 figures and beyond. Listen, Pradeep, I started Hadley Designs back in 2015, and it took me 7 years to actually grow the brand to an 8-figure brand. There were a lot of times where I myself wasn't sure that I could grow the brand to 8 figures, whether it be cash flow issues or whether I could actually lead an organization or our brand could stay relevant in the market. There were a lot of stumbling blocks that I hit along the way, and I wish I would have had a mentor or guide to help me overcome many of those stumbling blocks. So likewise, if our listeners have run into a plateau and are running into stumbling blocks and want to know the next steps to take their business to the next level, then go to ecommbreakthrough.com. That's Ecomm with 2 M's to learn more. And as a special gift to our podcast listeners, this month I'm giving away one $10,000 comprehensive business strategy audit session at no cost. All you need to do is email me at josh@ecommbreakthrough.com. And in the subject line, make sure you say strategy audit and plead your case as to why I should choose your brand to work with for this month. And if you don't win this month, don't worry, because you'll be entered to win for future months to come. But today, I'm super excited to introduce you to Pradeep. But before we get to that, I want to give a big thank you to Amy Weiss and thank her for referring Pradeep as a guest for the podcast today. Amy Weiss is the CEO of Amazing Things at Home. She is a top-rated e-commerce consultant and Amazon guru. She helps private label brands master the path from concept to launch. So go check out Amy at Amazing at Home. So go check her out, and a big shout out to her. But today I am excited to introduce you to Pradeep. He is trained as a scientist at Oxford University and Harvard University, and then he became the vice president of global business development for a biotech company. During the pandemic, he found himself in a unique situation, which led him to start his Amazon e-commerce business. He became a 7-figure seller in just 11 months and now has a new business model of acquiring distressed assets, and he also owns a boutique Amazon account and launch management agency. So welcome to the podcast, Pradeep.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. And my thanks to Amy as well. Always good fun chatting to Amy. So thank you for the referral, Amy. And it's a privilege to be on this podcast with you.
Well, Pradeep, I'm super excited to be talking with you. And you're currently, why don't you tell the listeners where you're currently, staying right now? There's a little bit of background noise, but tell them where you're at, and just so that they know for context.
So I'm actually based in London. Unfortunately, there's a train strike going on. So I had to quickly pop into a hotel lobby. And I know this hotel very well, the people as well. I always kind of conduct business meetings here. But unfortunately today, for this podcast, there's a choir at the background. So it's Christmas. So I'm like, who are these people? And they're still singing. So it might be a good vibe, but we'll see how the podcast goes. So apologies if there's a bit of background noise.
Hey, that's all good. And everybody loves a little bit of, background Christmas music as well. So that's good, even though you might be listening to this in June of the following year. But with that being said, Pradeep, you come with a lot of knowledge and background. You've done some really cool things. And what I think is interesting is you have a background that not many people have, right? You've went through Oxford, you went to Harvard as a scientist, and now you've pivoted into e-commerce. So why don't you give people a quick rundown of that career path or history that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So, people read this CV and profile, they're like, wow. I'm like, yeah, I'm nothing special. So, I always describe myself as a serial dropout. And I tell kids when I go around the world and particularly in the UK and talk to kids about my career and what I've seen. I left school at a very young age. I hated school. I hated studying and learning. Left at 16, worked in cafes, hotels, and bars, kind of got streetwise, got into trouble, but not too much trouble. Then I said, what the hell am I doing with my life at 21? So I went to a small college. I think the US guys will call it a state kind of school or, a community college, sorry. And I done very well there. And then eventually I got a scholarship to Imperial College, which is like your MIT. Then I got a scholarship to Oxford. Then I became a Fulbright scholar at Harvard. So I done all that in 6 to 7 years. It was ridiculously hard. And I tell kids, do it while you can at a young age. Do it in the proper way and manner. I kind of went militant in my 20s. But that journey gave me the ability to ask questions. What is society telling me? How quickly can I scale success? And how quickly can I scale to actually meet my goals? So when I was doing that journey, I done it very quickly, done my PhD. And then when I went to Harvard, I came back and I said, hey guys, professors, give me some money. I got some job targets and I'll get to Amazon. And they said, yeah, you're too young. It'll take 30 years. So I always tell people life is all about a numbers game, a sales game, and a risk game. So I made 272 phone calls, and one guy picked up in China. And I said, hey, can I come to China and discover drugs? They're like, come over. So I was I was 29. I packed my bags, went to China within 10 days, landed, became associate professor, then VP of business development, discovered those 3 drugs that my professors in the West would say 30 years in 18 months. So again,
Wow.
Scale. How quickly can you scale? How quickly can you get your goal? And when I discovered those, I was really happy. Then my CEO was like, hey, come over here and do some business development. So when I was doing business development, I learned about M&A. I wasn't a numbers guy or legal guy, but I could do the science. I can analyze data. And I think that's very important for e-commerce sellers and data and, how data can be implemented. Then I can do the deals, negotiate, see what a good price is and a bad price is, and pick up these distressed assets, meaning there's a asset there or a company for a cheaper price, or they may be going down and you pick it up and turn it around. And then when I came back in China, the pandemic hit. And it got very hard to live in China because of the lockdowns and so forth. So Josh, they told me I have to go to this hotel to eat some food. And some of these listeners might know my story by now. But when I go to this restaurant, all I see is all these Chinese men on laptops smoking away with their laptops. And I said, hey, what do you guys do? And they're like, we sell on Amazon. We're an e-commerce seller. I said, huh? What's that? Like, I had no idea, 2.5, 3 years ago, what e-commerce was. I said, hey, I do corporate business development. Can I see your numbers? And what is this? I'm a very curious being, right? I see 300,000 days. I see 200% ROIs. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So within 3 days, with VPN, no Helium 10, no Jungle Scout, I set up my business. I kind of haggled my way saying, hey, to one of these factory owners, give me some toys. I started selling in the UK, taught myself everything on the side. I was still doing the science. And the toys are selling very well. I'm like, hey, this is a side hustle and it's going well, right? And then I had no idea what black hat was, white hat, baseball cap. I had nothing. I didn't know who Amy Weaves was, Josh Hadley. I didn't know anyone. And then I said, okay, China's great. I done my CV. I done all the things in science. Let's go back to the UK. Came back to the UK. I went to approach the traditional pharma and biotech company saying, hey, I got all this experience. Give me a job. Then nope, you're too young and overqualified. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So then I said, I packed my career. And it comes down to what people say, what's the biggest difference for very successful people I've seen in life, not me, but others. It comes down to risk appetite, how willing someone is for their risking appetite. So I quit my career, started the e-commerce, permanently, started Amazon, started learning about the networks, the people, started giving talks, scaled to 7 figures very quickly. Then I thought, hey, I can start this acquisition process, the distress acquisition process, the same thing, and acquire this down market. So that's when I started this kind of acquisition journey as well. So launch brands, keep my brands, and also acquire as well. That's a long story, but I think it's very important people get the background and the mindset, because people get confused when they see these brands and fancy names and PhDs, but I'm just a serial dropout.
Yeah, no, Pradeep, I mean, what an amazing background and experience you have. But at the end of the day, I think you never left that. You've always had that hustle and appetite for risk that you've maintained, right? And I think those are things that are innately within us. And some of us, we need to develop more of that, right? Of hustle and grind. But some of these are naturally occurring in many of us, to where it's like, there's just something that keeps me driving and moving forward. Like, some people are just very driven individuals. And that's what I love, is that the world is so big and there are so many opportunities for all of us, that if you are driven enough and you're hungry enough to succeed, you will succeed. Doesn't mean the first thing that you attempt will be the thing, but you're the type of person who's never going to give up, even when the going gets tough. And so I love to kind of hear your experience, and you are still very successful, even as, the VP of business development. But you've been crushing it in the e-commerce space. So tell us about what you have currently going on right now, Pradeep. Are you still running your Amazon brand and acquiring other businesses? Tell us a little bit more about what your day-to-day looks like now and the businesses that you're operating.
Yeah, so at the moment, I do a lot of things, but I like to keep myself busy. Wake up in the morning, keep myself busy. By the way, just going back to your point on risk appetite, I think if you're ambitious and you keep changing your goal and challenging your goal, if your ambition goes up, it correlates well with risk appetite, because you've got to take risks for every step of the ambitious ladder. So that's what I realized as well. So if you keep setting your goals and keep bumping them up, you have to naturally take more risk. And if it's innate or not, yes, I agree. But if you bump up your goals, you have more appetite for risk. But coming back to your question, I run brands. I wake up in the morning, I make my China calls, check the inventory, check with my inventory manager, check with my suppliers. I always make a case, reach out everyone, call my Chinese colleagues, my factory, saying, hey, how are you? Check on a daily basis or every 3 or 4 days. Then I go on some consulting calls, particularly in science. I still keep the science also, because I like that kind of intellectual side, and also try to help young CEOs and other companies grow, startups. So I consult on that side. Then I go back, and by probably around 1, 2 o'clock, I start looking at M&A deals, so distressed asset deals and those deals as well. So we look at, companies. As I told you, we probably looked at, earlier I told you previously that we looked at 90 businesses so far in the last 2 quarters already. I mean, this month is, I don't know when the recording will go, but this is December 13th. We already this month looked at 20 odd deals as well that come to us from all angles. So look at those M&A deals. Then when it becomes a bit more in the evening time, UK time, I'll talk to my teams in Pakistan, in Philippines, my VAs, to make sure all the systems are in check. Everyone knows what's going on. And that's my day. So run brands and also look at M&A deals and start trying to make some deals as well.
I love that. That's great. Well, with as much as you have going on, I imagine that you have teams, which you kind of mentioned, that are kind of coordinating a lot of the day-to-day operations of the business, right? In order for you to have reviewed, 20 different potential deal, M&A opportunities, you have to be able to have a team that's keeping the day-to-day of your brands running. Is that correct? Would you mind sharing with the audience what your kind of organizational structure looks like in order to run multiple brands, and what your team is doing for you?
Yeah, sure. So I have an overall manager. Then we have a PPC manager. an inventory manager, account manager, and that's kind of the Amazon brand. And then on the side, part of the team, I just have a M&A guy, which really means we just kind of administrative role. Here are the accounts, here are the kind of P&L forecasts, here's the numbers, all ordered, so I can go in and check these on a daily basis or whatnot. I like to get nitty and gritty with the M&A. It's probably when deal flow gets a bit more, I might need that guy or someone else to step up. But I love to make those calls. Germany, UK, we dealt something in Australia, in US a lot. So I actually make those Zoom calls, talk to the owners. I try to do this a lot to say what's going on, what's happening to the brand, why is it failing, why are you selling it cheaper, how the COGS how the inventory. And you learn so much of why people are going down, why people are exiting, and why sometimes aggregators or others who are actually well-versed in the industry are losing out. So that can also help you as a brand owner think around and say, hey, this is how we scale. Hey, we shouldn't go to this end, and so forth.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that as you do get to review, acquiring other brands, you are seeing like mistakes other people are making, why they started slipping and why they're trying to exit their business. Some people are trying to run away from, the train going in the wrong direction, and they don't know how to get it back on the right track. And so I think you've got a lot of experience, and I want to dive into, what you're seeing as you look under the hood of multiple businesses, mistakes that you're seeing made there. But before we get into that, our earlier conversation before we hit the record button, you mentioned, it's kind of a unique opportunity right now, and you feel like there's a space for kind of having or being a solo aggregator. Can you tell me more about, why you think that that's a thing that can happen in today's environment and why that might be so important for people to consider?
Sure. You're quite famous in the field, so some of your listeners might be very sophisticated, so I might be preaching to the choir here. But I know a lot of people already started acquiring. But I think it's a great time. And the way I compare it is to the kind of a dot-com bubble, where you had the Internet of Things coming in the 80s and 90s. Then you had this big boom, people make a lot of money, exiting for millions and billions like Mark Cuban. And then you had the crash, right? And then you had very sophisticated iterations coming through, Google really solidifying their step and so forth. Then you had the Facebooks, the Amazons coming. Well, Amazon was already there, but accelerating on, right? So I think that's where the space is now. We're at the kind of an e-commerce burst of the bubble, right? And so now is the time where sophisticated individuals or real people who are willing to get driven and get down to the nitty-gritty will succeed. And the people who made money, kudos to you. You got on the right time, you made money, you get out, and you can invest and have a luxury life. Really happy for you. But then, the ambitious people can build on those by acquiring cheaper distressed assets and actually build a couple of brands, an empire, and then leverage that more for more cash flow, I believe. And that's fun. Building stuff for me is fun. Or you can pick up very cheap assets and turning them around as well. So I think this is the e-commerce bubble burst. Where there's danger, there's opportunity. So I think This is the right time to do these things.
Yeah, I also agree that right now is the time for micro brands, right? It's never been easier for somebody to, from their basement, create a new brand and have it on the world's biggest, shopping platform, which is Amazon right now. And to, it used to be like getting into retail is so difficult, right? You're paying for slotting fees. You have to upfront all of this inventory and you're kind of betting the farm in a way. But on Amazon, it's like you can test stuff out very cheaply. Your risk on Amazon is lower than if you're just going into retail. So with that being said, there's been a rise in all of these micro brands, and being able to roll them up and actually scale them profitably, I think is a huge opportunity, because many of those people that started their brand from their basement have no desire to implement operating systems to really do what it's going to take in order to scale a brand to that 8 figures and beyond or whatever it needs to be. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people like you and I to dive in and help, strategically position or pivot these businesses for future success. And it's a rewarding opportunity. So Pradeep, with that being said, tell me, how are you sourcing these deals? Are you going to, I know there's a lot of brokerage firms out there. You have Quiet Light, Ecomm, Empire Flippers. There's a lot of those kind of well-known M&A websites, right, that list businesses for sale. Is that where you're sourcing, or you find many of these businesses that you're reviewing their deal structures for? Or are you doing, kind of cold calling and outreach to discover brands that haven't even listed publicly that they're available for sale?
Yeah, I think if you're coming to healthy assets per se, the brokerage firms are quite good. The Empire Flippers, whatnot. Those brokers are good. I talk to independent brokers as well. They're quite good as well. Distressed assets, people still are very guarded, have an ego, a bit shy and a bit embarrassed to say they're failing, which is fine, right? So it comes down to personal connections, getting on podcasts or going to events, seeing people, telling them what you do, and then they reach out to yourself. So all of the above, you just have to get out there, hustle, cold call, let people come to you, talk to brokers, maybe even talk to aggregators, maybe talk to people who own multiple brands saying, hey, you have something that's going wrong or whatnot, we can take over. So talking about the micro brand, so far at this podcast, we actually acquired only one brand per se, but we're in talks with acquiring two healthy kind of smaller brands. We think we can pivot and scale up. We brought a brand for 99p. Can you believe it, Josh? Which is like $1.13. So that was an inventory. Yeah. So, sometimes you don't have to compete with 200, 300 million raises with aggregators. I done big money deals in corporate pharma, but sometimes you get the best deals are very cheap, and then the multiples are crazy. So we looked at many businesses. This business was a husband and wife business, and we can get down to failures if you want. But what we saw is that inventory was overstocked, and one particular inventory, in this case, a baby product, I'm not going to go into the product itself, was worth scaling in the UK market. So what we did was we're essentially white labeling the inventory that's already here. Luckily for us, the trademark was on the product itself, but not a trademark in the registry. So we trademarked the logo, the brand as well, and we brought the inventory. Now we gave 99p. Everyone's like, why would you sell? Because they were spending $8,000 to $10,000 a month on inventory for the whole kind of their portfolio. So if they can get rid of 5,000 units of their backs and reduce that price, that we're doing them a favor. So you got to go in that saying, how can I do you a favor, but in return benefit me as well? So I took inventory of them, and to make a transactional deal, I paid 99p. So that's one of the ways we kind of acquired and are scaling now.
I love that. Yeah, I think that would be a great case study to dive into a little bit deeper, right? So you bought a brand or, a business for, as little as $1.39, $1.13, whatever it was, is a very small amount as your upfront, payment. And we've actually had Roland Frazier on the podcast as well. So he's one of the first episodes. So I encourage our listeners to go look at that, because he does talk so much about how to acquire businesses for no money out of pocket, right? So he's talking about, hey, how can you get creative with your financing, just like you're talking about here, Pradeep? And this is a great case study of like how to be creative with deal structures. So anyways, Roland Frazier's one to check out. But Pradeep, why don't you go a little bit deeper into this case study? How did this all evolve, and what have been the results since then? And how did you structure things with this husband and wife?
Yeah, sorry. So coming back to your sources, one of the sources are VAs. VAs are highly connected in any country, Pakistan, Philippines, South America. So one of the VAs contacted my VAs, and this is important. Everyone is someone big in their world. That's why I kept telling. So I never look down or look up on people, just look straight, right? I think I nicked that from Sadhguru, but anyway. But yeah, my VA is approaching saying, hey, we know this VA. He's working with the husband and wife team in the UK. They have a brand, and they had like 3 or 4 brands ready to launch. But their first brand, that was their major cash flow, kind of cash cow, is failing. So they have no money to launch others. So again, we can go into, I've got, for this podcast, I've got 4 things I think we see very much in all of the distressed brands. Well, we can go into that. But for this specific case study, so then I said, yes, let's have a chat. So talk to them, and I said, hey, what's going on? This is what's happening. I said, okay, let me see all your inventory and your brand and see what's happening. And that's how we got creative with deals. So yeah, I mean, you can get creative with financing. You can have seller note. You can have revenue-based financing. You can have in the US, I think you call it SBA loan, and then put the percentage up front yourself. But really, what you're doing is trying to buy inventory and then rescaling and rebranding. And it's even better if it's already in Amazon and they are willing to give that away for free or for a very low cost. And you can even say, hey, let me pump some PPC money in with the credit coming already in my account, or maybe use daily allowance or weekly allowance and whatnot if you don't have it, or a credit card. But let's take over your account. Let's make a deal, take over your account. I'll take over the inventory and I'll pay you for the inventory and calls after I sell these. So usually these people are trying to get out. So you're trying to give them money on their way out. So the earn out is in a couple of months. So it's how you negotiate that deal. And sometimes it's about, looking dumb, looking naive, not being embarrassed to have a low offer. Sometimes people are not willing to look cheap. Yeah. You got to be willing to ask.
That's good to know. So you acquired the entire brand or just their inventory?
So in this case, it's a distressed inventory purchase. But we were lucky, and this is where if you go out there, you make your own luck. In this case, the inventory had the brand name and the image and logo, but they didn't trademark the actual logo. So we trademarked and made it into a brand.
Okay, good to know. Interesting. So yeah, Pradeep, you mentioned earlier that you kind of see 4 common pitfalls or mistakes that these other companies are making as you're reviewing, potential M&A deals. So why don't let's dive into those 4 things and let's get as detailed as possible with actionable items that our listeners can make sure that they're not making those same mistakes so that they don't become a distressed, sell or exit.
So the 4 things, and it's quite interesting because it wasn't the 4 things I expected, but it's the foundation, as we always see the foundation. It's COGS. It's the ability, let's look at COGS. It's the ability to negotiate COGS in the first place with factories, aka in China, anywhere in the world, and how to renegotiate COGS as the brand grows. Is the ability to manage inventory flow, timing, shipping, and storage, and 3PL, right? It's also the ability to, I say, not spend too much on gurus and consultants and luxury items in the field because, we're always inundated. And these are great people. They don't mean bad, but we see excessive spending in the business to do things that are not necessary. And we can get the examples of those as well. And it's the 4th one, it's the ability to think scaling means multiple brand launches and product launches at the same time. And sometimes scaling means to level off horizontally for a while, particularly in this time, and grow. What we don't see, and this is very interesting, is that we don't see massive differences in appalling PPC or listing optimization. Those 2 things we believe, yes, everyone is up to their own flavor how they do PPC and listing, right? Obviously, we can change those things and we can do those things, but they're easier to change. when you get COGS and inventory and mismanagement of cash flow, that's harder to change, and that's all a dent already in the business. So you have a lot of people in the space, in conferences and so forth, talk about PPC, listing optimization, branding, imaging, which is all fine, but those things can be changed very quickly. But generally, if you're a good seller, you're at 7 or 8 figures already. Those things are worked out. So we don't see massive flows in those, but we can look at COGS. We can look at inventory management and flow, unnecessary spending, and also the fourth one now just totally escaped my mind.
Fourth one was multiple brands, right, and products.
Multiple brands and launch. Yeah. So if you want to, I don't know, Josh, if you want to deep dive into all those 4 things individually, or I think that would be very good.
Yeah, let's deep dive into each of those individually. I love that you made the mention of when we go to conferences and as you listen to speakers speak on stage or even listening to podcasts, time and time again, we hear the same optimization strategies and the same keyword strategies. And it's just a new tool that people are using. But instead, what you're saying is like the hard stuff is what people aren't necessarily talking about. People aren't getting into the weeds of COGS and negotiating with suppliers and renegotiating on an ongoing basis and the finer details of logistics and where you're warehousing things. And with Amazon, reducing inventory limits across the board for people, what are people doing now to kind of prepare themselves for a world where Amazon does limit you completely and with maybe 1 or 2 months worth of inventory, and that's it? And how are you staging your inventory and still winning on Amazon in that environment? And then cash flow. I mean, all of these things are such great topics. So yes, let's do a deep dive into each of these. Let's start with the COGS first.
Yeah, sure. So what we see is quite interesting with COGS. The COGS numbers to start off with sometimes are the minimum, we say 3 to 5, but as Amazon and e-commerce goes more expensive, I think it's above 8 to 10. So if you're buying something for $1, you should be above 8 to 10 in terms of selling prices, if not more, right? What we see is again and again, people are saying, hey, we have, particularly beginners, hey, we have this, it's 3 to 4, but with inventory, PPC shipping, and all these things, it's just the profits are gone. Before the pandemic or during the pandemic, it's very profitable. And this is, by the way, experience. This sounds stupid. I find myself finding myself stupid explaining this to someone, but we actually see it every day. 7, 8, 9-figure sellers saying, "Do you want this brand?" Because the COGS have gone too expensive because they haven't worked out fundamentally the multiples, and the multiples have to be really strong now and a bigger multiple margin to sell. So those COGS are fundamentally negotiable, and you have to have the right product and the COGS at a cheap price. Number one, it sounds stupid, but that's what we see. Number two is the renegotiation. Hey, we brought 100,000 units. Next time we're going to have 400,000 units, but you're selling for the same price. Why? Your factory should be giving you a note or, to handle cash flow or a cheaper price because they're getting raw material for cheaper. And what we see is, I sign NDAs, but what we see is some of these aggregators and others who are famous, when they go back and some of these factories are quite savvy, say, hey, you raised X amount of money, all of a sudden your COGS are gone up. So, so I think that's again how you negotiate and how you have exclusive agreements for a period of time, particularly on your best-selling products. We do this in pharma and other business fields all around the world. You want it for 5 years? This is the price. If the inflation goes down or if the market changes, this is going to be a price. We have the power to change it, not you. So it might be having exclusive agreements, and that's how sophisticated we have to get in e-commerce, because this is no longer a mom and pop kind of operation. This has to be sophisticated. Even if you're a mom and pop or a guy in a basement, that's how you should be thinking. Solar, you could be a corporate on your own, but you got to think like that. So COGS and how you define the first COGS and renegotiate the COGS is very important. Then thirdly, how are you people storing COGS, right? How are you doing unit economics, and how are you storing Excel sheet or software and so forth And that has to be updated on a daily basis. We see fundamental mistakes and we see fundamental errors as well. You can pick it up straight away from profit and loss statements as well. So that's something people have to be aware of. And it gets really hard because if you have multiple brands, multiple products, multiple inventory, it's all over the place.
Gets complicated really quick. So basically what you're saying is that, especially in the environment, the inflationary environment that we're in today, a lot of sellers, I think, are stuck between a rock and a hard place where their COGS have gone up dramatically, right? And then let alone the container prices have come down recently, but those were sky high for a period of time. But yet what I found on Amazon is you still find a lot of those overseas manufacturers still charging the same price for their product or even less. And so while people should be raising their prices, they're doing the exact opposite and just squeezing every, dime of margin from their business, which is, dramatically impacting them. So what do you do in that type of situation, Pradeep? Like, people aren't raising their prices on Amazon, right? So if you're going to raise your price, you're going to be higher, right, than the average market. But now your cost of goods have increased. Is this literally just a negotiation with the supplier and saying, hey, my business is not viable if my COGS are at this point, right? So you'll lose my entire business if we can't come to a resolution. Is that what you're saying people should do? Or are there different ideas that you would give to people that are in that situation? Their COGS have gone up a lot, but the price on Amazon that they can charge really hasn't changed, and the market's about the same as it was even pre-COVID.
Yeah, so there's different ideas. Number one, I'll renegotiate, particularly if you got a hero product and you're buying lots of it from the same factory, renegotiate. Number two, if you see a lot of Chinese or new players coming into your market and you're outpriced, get out. Or if you think your branding's strong, what you do is rebrand, Western style. Obviously, people know that already, and keep your normal pricing strategy. Pricing strategy is important. Sometimes value propositions in the price itself. So if you think you're still selling and you got good reviews, and keep your price high, and people might see a difference just from the eye and your value proposition. But if you think you're getting squeezed out, it's fine leveling out and selling out and saying, hey, I had a great run, by the way, I hit like 8 home runs, American kind of analogy. It's been a good ride, made a profit, made a brand, enjoyed it. Let's go to the next one, or let's see how we can rebrand this into another kind of product. It's not bad getting out. And number 4, what I'll also do is try to understand, and this is that the Chinese and other factories, obviously they might be manufacturers and they can afford to keep the price or go down. But what I think is happening, and what I have seen, is even these factories have overestimated their inventory. And that's the second point, inventory management. I think they have made 100,000 units and they're stuck in China saying, what the hell do we do? Just flood Amazon, let's sell out and get out. So imagine the case of you phoning all the Chinese networks you have, saying how much of this is happening. So you might outlast them in that niche, niche, until they sell out. But that's a risky strategy. But I know by talking to my China networks that, Chinese exports have gone down if you looked at it. And, one of our pet suppliers, they said, hey, we have 100,000 of these products. Do you want it? I'm like, no, because you're distressed and you're the manufacturer. So it's like, that might be a case where they might sell out and you might just have to hang in there. It's like war. You're on the Western Front and you just have to dig the trenches and stay out.
Yeah. And I think from my experience, I see kind of the same thing. There are a lot. I think where I see Amazon going in the next few years is I think Amazon customers are kind of getting tired of buying the cheap stuff on Amazon, so to speak. I think it's becoming very apparent when somebody gets something, it comes in a poly bag, right? There's no branding on it. They can't even pronounce the brand name itself, right? If they look at it on Amazon, it's amazing that those overseas sellers like can't come up with anything more than throwing a bunch of consonants together that don't even make sense. But I think the US consumer is kind of getting tired of that and realizing like, okay, maybe I don't need the cheapest thing on Amazon if I'm looking for, a new tumbler mug or something like that, because the quality is going to be a little bit lower. Instead, I think the US customer will shift now with inflation and, a pending recession and all these things. Like US consumers are being more, discerning with their money at the same time. So they are looking for cheaper options, but I still think like they're looking for solid quality as well. So to your point, your positioning for your product and price can become very, very important. For example, we in one of our most competitive spaces in our business, we are 2 times the price of our other competitors. 2 times the price, right? They're selling for $12 and we're selling at $24.99. Yet our products are ranked consistently in the top 5 every single day. And so who do you think is going to win and outlast? I recently saw one of our overseas competitors that has been around for a long time. They continue to drop their price by $1 every month. And I was like, what is going on? Like Amazon fees are only increasing and yet you're like just throwing it all away. And I think to your point, like we have essentially outlasted them. Now, whether they come back or not, I don't know at this point, but I mean, they were like the market loser, so to speak, at like $9.99, cheapest price. And I'm like, there's no way, like you're making like maybe 10 cents a unit here, if that. And so there is a strategy in play there for business owners to like consider. Now you need to test it out, right? It's easier said than done to be able to charge double the market price, right? Now, a lot of that goes into branding and testing all that out, but there is a space like you talked about for it. You don't always, and you shouldn't be the low cost leader.
No, I agree. Coming back to one of your points, actually, it's a case study again. We looked at a distressed asset. Now, in terms of COGS, and we'll get the inventory next, is that we saw a brand. We didn't buy this brand. It was a baby product. And you go through this list. I'm like, what's this? It's so expensive. Why is it so expensive? So I'm like, hey, we signed an NDA. Can I speak to your supplier? And it turned out that COGS is also about saying, how much does this metal cost? How much does each piece component cost? How do you manufacture it? Where's the raw material from? What do you actually assemble for? Yeah. It turned out, and I'm like, why is this $18 to $20 more than a normal thing? Even when you Google on Amazon, Alibaba, right? It turned out this manufacturer sent a component out for it got stamped, the brand to get stamped, sent it back to the factory, assembled it, and then shipped it. That's $20 or $17. For that price, you can actually air express ship into the US and still save some money on PPC. So it's the ability to deep dive on the COGS as well. So they were losing out because they thought the branding was so much important in terms of stamping. And they forgot, by the way, that this $17 was part of a COGS because they've been running the business for 2 years. And then the aggregator that was looking at it, who said, we're not going to do it, didn't even look at it because they just said COGS, $100 or whatever it was, right? So they don't know how that COGS is. What does $50 COGS mean? And what is each component? So you've got to deep dive as well. So that's very important. And the savviness of this is how do you keep a high brand but cut down on essentials? Yes. So you don't need a poly bag, but can you get a more luxurious packaging but a cheaper kind of weight? You got to talk to those Chinese manufacturers or whatever manufacturers and get that branding and COGS down on an individual basis as well.
Yeah, I think what you talked about right there with like talking to your suppliers and discussing like what are the individual components that go into it, right? And you've got to get to a relationship with your suppliers that you can get their honesty on that, right? And be like, well, it's this much to source this component, this much to source that. And then you're like, oh, wait, this thing costs that much? Do we really need this little widget to go into our product? Or is there a cheaper alternative? And it's like, oh yeah, there is, but you asked for XYZ, so that's what we've been giving you. And it's like, wow, like that opens up to a whole new ball game So I love that. Pradeep, let's go on to number 2 there with inventory. What issues are you seeing? Let's deep dive there.
Inventory, everyone's overstocked for some reason. They thought Q4 is the time. It's this kind of formula, and I see it in different industries. If we're pharma, hey, go after this hot topic drug, or this is the rule of thumb. Q4, let's everyone stock up. It's going to be our biggest quarter. It doesn't work out sometimes. You don't have a crystal ball, so too much overstocking of inventory. Use of expensive 3PLs. Get somewhere cheaper. Actually, it might be easier to have shorter bursts of supplies coming in than a huge bunch of storing it somewhere. Or we've seen ridiculous deals, 100,000 units, 300,000 purchased for a year, and they can't sell out. So inventory management, forecasting, and also shipping as well. I think it's really bad. And that's where when you're picking up distressed assets or even healthy assets, you can really get creative and say, hey, give us a seller note in inventory because you're overstocked. So that's a real leverage point people can use. And you really need to manage that very well. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think that with Amazon's changing the game as it relates to, how they're warehousing products. So what advice do you have in terms of like finding less expensive 3PLs and getting the product closer, but more cheaply, and knowing that Amazon's not going to be the place where you can just dump your products anymore?
It comes down to, for me, and my inventory manager is making the calls, getting the conferences, hunt out for new 3PL and new kids on the block, because they're willing to give cheaper deals and make deals. And you can be creative with those deals. Particularly if you're a big seller, you can bring volume to them because they need new business. So, we've done very well working with the smaller guys. Not because they have smaller warehouses, because they're new kids on the block. They help you out very much. And they need their business to boom, so they'll give you very good deals and for long-term storage as well. And get out there and help them as well, advertise. Do some advertising and for them, and they will in return treat you kindly. So it's all a business negotiation. So that's a tip we've learned very well. You can't control Amazon. You can only control what you can do. So there's all these people about restock limits and everything. I'm like, okay, that's all good and good stuff, but how can I control what's in my kind of area? So that's the only thing I'll say. And I think the cheaper inland, particularly US, newer kids on the block, will give you a big deal. And that'll be very good.
That's great. That's great insight and great recommendation to go find some of the newer startup 3PLs. Maybe they don't have all of their processes, ironed out, so to speak. But if you're willing to grow with them, you could get some really good deals because, yeah, it's true. Even 3PLs are getting more and more expensive. So great insight. Don't also over order your inventory. Pradeep, I'm interested to kind of get your perspective on how do you balance ordering inventory, right, to get obviously the higher volume of units that you place, you can get a lower cost, but that also is going to take into consideration warehousing. And if you order a year's worth of inventory and your projections don't line up with that, wow, that's going to be really tough. Now that's 18, maybe 2 years worth of inventory. So what is your recommendation and best practice as it relates to inventory purchases, like buying 4 months, 6 months worth of inventory at any given point in time? Any guidelines that you have there?
No, this is what we've done, and we've never bought 1 year's of inventory. The maximum we bought is probably 6 months worth of inventory. What we've done is actually given the factories, in our case in China, enough money for raw materials. So they can purchase and store that in their factory and make it at our request. So even if we see growth, we've never seen 200% or 300% or 100% growth where that much inventory is necessary. So we've only seen 25 to 30% growth. So it might be a rule of thumb, and this is me speaking on what we've seen, and I might be totally wrong. There might be bigger 10, I don't know, 11 figure sellers, but we only seen 30% growth in terms of inventory every time we ship in. So that's kind of a buffer and safety zone as well, because your COGS can manage that. But if you have 100 or 200% or 1 year's worth of inventory, we've never been able to kind of store that. But we made deals with Chinese factories to actually store it for us until we need shipping. So the cycle is short on the 3PL side, but storage is actually free on the China side, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And we actually pay for the raw material. So they can have a lump of raw material instead of boxes all laid out in their factories. So that, I think, is key as well.
Yeah. Fascinating.
But that comes down with real negotiation and building a relationship and rapport. And I think that only works with the hero products or big volume products as well.
Yeah. At the end of the day, paying attention to your suppliers, your manufacturers, creating real partnerships with them. And then, this even goes into your next thing, which is going to be cash flow. But your supplier should be your biggest partner in your business. And I know for our business itself, our supplier is one of our biggest partners. We've been working with the same manufacturer for 7 years, and I have a great relationship with that other business owner, and we know it's a partnership. He goes out of business, I myself am out of luck, right? And so it's always a balance of like, hey, can you help me out here? Can you help me out here? When COVID hit, for example, in our business, overnight, Amazon introduced inventory limits for the first time, right? And we were immediately overstocked. And I was like, oh my goodness, let alone we were in like the party space. And so no party goods were moving at the time. And I was like, I can't even sell this even if I wanted to. Like this, we were in a world of hurt. And our supplier said, hey, I'll warehouse it for free for you, right? And they helped us get through that. And in addition to that, creative financing with your suppliers as well is super important, right? You've got to be able, can you get them to, actually produce the inventory and even ship it before you've paid anything for it, right? There are situations where you have no deposit because you have such a good relationship with that supplier. You're not paying anything up front. And you may even have terms where it's 30 days where you're actually selling the product before you've even paid for the product, right? Imagine what a shift that can have in your business if you're making money before you even have paid for that product. And that leads into cash flow. So let's talk about, cash flow. Excessive spending is what you kind of mentioned. What issues do you see there that sellers are making?
Yeah, we see three things particularly. Unnecessary spending on outside consultants, gurus, or external agencies. Poor human resources, and also poor negotiation of terms, as you just mentioned. So number one, I feel everyone obviously trying to make money, and everyone, consultants, gurus, agencies, they're all actually quite nice. I go to conferences, they mean well. But as a seller, you really need to pick and choose. It's like a kid in a candy store. Most of the sellers are in their 20s or early 30s, and they're very highly influenced, right? So you're like, boom, 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 boom. You really need to say, hey, here's my weakness for the next 6 months. Can I just spend on this? Case study, beauty product, doing very well, wanted to rebrand, went in trying to get a good manager, paying, I think, $10,000 per month for brand management, not even pictures, but consulting, went down. Distressed asset now. Another prominent business which has 5-6 good brands, hired human resources, a former US Army supply chain expert. I'm sure this guy is super brighter than you and I, Josh. He used to get bullets and tanks into Afghanistan and Iraq, apparently, and they hyped him up. But they were paying, when we saw it, they were paying $100,000, $120,000, $140,000 for this guy. You don't need that kind of expertise for 10 ASINs or 6 ASINs into Amazon USA. So sometimes it's just overthinking. You're still an Amazon seller and you're not a corporate. I think that's, who am I? And the aggregators might be listening saying, who is this guy? But I think that's also a space where aggregators are failing out as well. Yeah, you can get 5 or 6 guys, VAs, for the price of one MBA. I'm not saying MBAs are bad, but MBAs might not be the right thing for that job description. So poor human resources, poor excessive spending, conferences. We see a lot of expenses on conferences. You're only seeing the same guys, same talk every time. It's just what we call in England a piss up. You're just getting drunk with the same people, with the same knowledge. How much time can you sit? Well, if they're paying for you, if you're a guest speaker, if you do it once locally or one internationally, it's fine. Use that money to actually go to a cheaper country like Vietnam or India or China, make good networks with people at cheaper price than seeing the same guys in the US or UK. And there's nothing wrong with these guys, but you can use the money more fruitfully and cheaper. And really, I mean, we see the P&Ls, and this is a real issue. And the third is poor terms. So you need 30, 60-day, 90-day terms. Sometimes even 120-day terms we've used as well to say, hey, we're ordering this much. You got to give us terms, 30% deposit, 15% deposit. So it helps your cash flow as well. Coming back to the point, if you're going to acquire brands, cash flow is king. The quickest thing you can do to increase revenue is buy revenue. So buying brands. But the brand's cash flow has to be cash flow positive. Even if you're buying a distressed asset, you have to go in there saying, I'm cutting all this spending out to make it cash flow positive. So it pays for itself. So now there's cash flow and we look better. And then you leverage that cash flow to buy even more. And there's more cash flow and there's a surplus going. So terms are very important for that as well. And how you negotiate terms is very important. You can actually, get a guy, when you go to a new field or a new category, you might bring someone along and say, here's my friend, Josh. Josh used to do party. Now, when you bring Josh along, your actually credentials are now matched with Josh, and Josh has to agree to come along. So now Josh can say, hey, I know Pradeep. Can you give him terms, not like 120 days for me, but a 30-day term for Pradeep, because he wants to go into a party space and I know him, I can vouch for him. So cash flow and terms might be also about networking a local group as well, bringing some people along as well. So that's the solution.
I love that. Pradeep, what great insights that you shared with all of us. Thank you so much. Last thing here is creating multiple brands and trying to launch multiple products simultaneously. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, don't do it if you can't afford it. It's very simple. It sounds so stupid, but because I personally think, and I'm guilty of this, going through, Jungle Scout or Helium 10, all these softwares or Amazon Scout. By the way, no one's giving me partnerships. I'm still mentioning your name. Anyway, but going through these places, right? It's addictive. You as an entrepreneur, as an Amazon e-commerce person, you see that the calls, you see the growth and margin. You're like, oh my God, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And it's fun. And then you go to China, make deals, it's fun. But the thing is, if you can't generate the cash flow, don't do it. And we've seen time and again, big companies, small companies, trying to launch brands and they go distressed very quickly because the PPC spend is so much now and the launch criteria is so much now. You just can't catch up. The best thing is to level your business, make sure you got a healthy profit coming in for 3 to 6 months, and you have that buffer, and then you slowly launch as well. And use as much momentum you can and cash liquidity, if you can, or leverage to launch that one product where you think it's kind of a home run at this stage where the market is so fragile.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, Pradeep. One of the things that, another reason why it took our business so long to grow to that 8-figure mark is because honestly, we started while I was still working a full-time corporate job, right? And so what I used that money, my salary is what we used to pay the bills, right? And we kept funneling, any profits back into the business by launching new products. But that didn't mean we were launching new products, like multiple products every single month, right? we did it very judiciously, and it was just my wife and I and a VA to begin with for years. For a few years, it was just, all right, we can launch something maybe every 3 to 6 months, right? When we saw that cash flow come back in, then we could be comfortable in investing into the new, products. So I think for people that are in that earlier stages, maybe you just stumbled upon 7 figures, because we did that as well. We did 7 figures our first year on Amazon, but that still did not mean, great, we have $1 million business. That means we can go crazy, like launching new product after new product. Like, we did it very slowly and methodically. And now we're at a different point in our business to where we can launch multiple products per month. But that's only because we're an 8-figure business, and the product categories we're going into, we're not talking about huge COG expenditures and huge PPC budgets either. So like, we know our budget at the same time. So it comes down to budgeting and forecasting your financial statements as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're going to go into distressed asset business, acquisition business, or launching products, or even scaling a product, I think this period and any period is you'll learn to cut anything of waste. I hear this term, oh, it's my baby, it's your business. It's not your baby. Your baby is your kid. Your business is a business, right? And you got to learn to cut things out. And if it's failing, cut it out. And maybe this is scaling now instead of this, right? Scaling can be horizontal growth, keeping ranking 3 to 8 instead of number 1. Still, that money's coming in, and let time help you to stabilize and go again, then go again and go again. I failed items. I feel, but it's about how you cut it and how you manage those egos and expectations, and get out of the rut and make those creative deals.
Yeah, I completely agree. You've got to be quick to cut things that aren't working and doubling down on the things that are working. So,
and also don't take too much out of your business. As you mentioned, I'm still doing the consulting, and that's the majority of how I pay my living, day-to-day expenses, living cost analysis. I enjoy it, but I don't take too much out of the business. You don't need to learn too much by traveling a lot. Travel to the right places, meet the right people. And usually if you're in the Western Hemisphere, they're quite easy to connect over the internet, or quite easy to connect. So don't take too much out of the business. Keep it in. Cash is king. Cash flow is the name of the game, and particularly during this time. I know it sounds silly, but if I can show you what I can show you, every business, it's just poor management. Truly is.
Pradeep, this has been awesome. I think so many actionable takeaways. And even for myself, there's things that I've jotted down that we can improve in our business as well. So I love to leave our audience with 3 actionable takeaways from each episode. Here are the 3 takeaways that I noted, Pradeep. Let me know if you think I'm missing something. But number 1, I think you need to be focused on your supplier partnership first and foremost, right? Like, if there's anything that you can do as you set goals for the following year or for the next 6 months, whatever it is, I would focus on highlighting and improving the relationship with you have with your supplier and manufacturing partner, and seeing them as a true partner in your business. That's foundation step number 1, which then kind of leads into action step number 2, which is start negotiating with your supplier, right? Start asking those hard questions, discuss your terms, right? See if there is an opportunity to get better terms for your product so that you can get the product and start selling it before you've paid for it, right? That can be a game changer. Talking about, opening the curtain and peeling back the onion, so to speak, so that you can know the price of all the individual components that are going into that product to manufacture. And maybe there's an expensive component that you don't necessarily need, product packaging as well. And so that would be action step number 2, is start opening those negotiation conversations. And then I would say kind of the last takeaway for our audience is to be better at cash flow management and really analyzing all of the expenses that are going into your business. We've had previous podcast guests, Scott Dietz was on here with the Northbound Group, that talked about how one expense, a $1 expense now could actually be considered a $5 expense when it comes time to exit, right? If you're paying $500 a month for a particular software, well, guess what? And if you're not fully utilizing that software, it's not necessary. When it comes time to exit, that then becomes a $6,000 a month type of expense to the business. Times that by 12, and then times that by your, what you're going to get. And you can see like all of a sudden your $500 expense can be a $1,000, multiple $1,000 expense to your business that you don't need. And like you said, cutting back on a lot of the conference like spend, and always thinking like, do I really need this? Does my business need this right now? And being efficient with it, not taking too much capital out of your business. So that would be my final takeaway. Pradeep, is there anything else that you would recommend from our conversation as an actionable takeaway for our listeners?
No, I think you summed everything up very well. Whenever you talk to China or suppliers or your agency, it's always, I would like to say it's not a transaction, it's a human interaction. Get people on your side, try to cut costs down, go down to basics. And the basics, if you get them right, I think will be recession proof, because the basics always are a strong foundation.
Yeah, Pradeep, I love that. I'm going to make that a quote, put that on in my office. Your partnerships with your manufacturers, your agencies, they're not transactions. They genuinely are human interactions. So it causes us, it's extra work, right? To go the extra mile and create relationships. It's easy to just click on a website and be like, oh yeah, I need this. But if you actually open up a dialogue with people, get to know them, doors start to open for you in ways that you could kind of never imagine. So Pradeep, last thing, I've got my 3 final questions that I like to ask all of our guests. So number 1, what's been the most influential book that you've read and why?
The Second Bounce of the Ball, how to take risks, how to turn risk into opportunity. The Second Bounce of the Ball. Apologies, the author's name doesn't come to mind, but he was kind of a pioneer in the PE field, and he was the first to kind of aggregate or buy businesses and so forth. Second Bounce of the Ball, how to take risk into opportunity. Very good book.
Awesome. I have not heard that one before, and I have jotted that down. Very exciting. Number 2, what is your favorite productivity software tool, or a software tool that you've been using in your business that has been very helpful and maybe some of the other sellers don't know about it or should consider using it?
Yeah, we just started using this for 3 or 4 months. It's called Parsimony. It has the ability to do a lot of things: HR, accounting, inventory, brands, unit economics, all in one.
Awesome. We actually had that Steve Simonson's software. We had Steve Simonson on the podcast previously, and he talked about that. So Parsimony, definitely go check that out as a great software tool. And kind of an ERP system, correct? Is that the way you guys are using it?
Yeah. And the beauty is that you can actually tell those guys to kind of fine tune it for your needs as well. You can kind of have our own white label product as well.
Awesome. Love that. All right, Pradeep, last question here is, who is someone you admire or respect the most in the e-commerce space and that other sellers should be paying attention to and following?
You said his name, probably Steve Simonson, the old Jew. Yeah, anything I do in life, science, academia, always go to the oldest and the wisest, and to see, you find someone who's done it and done it well. And I think he's done it very well, and he's proven it over decades. So, I think Steve Simonson is the man.
Awesome. I love that, Pradeep. Well, thank you for sharing your great knowledge with us today. If people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
On LinkedIn, just Pradeep Kumar Sacitharan or PK Sacitharan on Twitter, PK Sacitharan on Instagram. I think you will have post maybe my details. Just type my name in. I'm here for everyone in the community. I like helping people out. Let's have a chat and let's see what we can do. I'm always here.
I love it. And we'll link your name there and LinkedIn in the show notes for people to connect with you. But Pradeep, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Really appreciated it. It's a good chat. And thank you to Amy as well for connecting us.
Thank you for listening. Visit ecommbreakthrough.com for more information. If you've enjoyed today's episode, the best way you can show your appreciation is by clicking the subscribe button and quickly leaving a review. See you again next time.